Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. On today's episode, special crossover edition with Dane from Locked On Stars to actually talk not as much about the game, but we kind of talk about state of the franchises, where kind of maybe the missing pieces for the Stars as they make their playoff run, where the Sharks are headed, if these two teams could potentially be business partners here in the future. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to this Western Conference crossover. The Dallas Stars on the road in San Jose for their final meeting with the Sharks this season. The season series split at 1 apiece. And talking about this game with JD Young, host of Locked On San Jose Sharks. JD, how's it going? I know this is kind of the last home game for the Sharks before, like we said before we started recording, a brutal road trip ahead of them.
Yeah, it's been a long season, and it's about to get a little bit longer here for the Sharks as like you said, this is their last home game before a massive East Coast swing where they take on teams like the Bruins and the Panthers and the Hurricane, just some of these like top end teams that are just going to put the final nail in the Sharks season that has been a bad one.
Yeah, no doubt. And even with the bad, there is, of course, the bright spot, which is Erik Karlsson, who I know we've talked about before on previous crossovers this season. And I'm sure he's a hot topic of discussion this year, just with the performance that he's had. And I know that, there's a little bit of discussion. I know it's a weird player to talk about with, trade rumors because there's, 4 years left on his deal. I think his $11.5 million cap hit per season lasts through 2027. Is this a guy that you for sure want to see stick around and maybe win the Norris Trophy? Is that kind of the ideal situation this season where the Sharks get, a potential top 5 pick and also, have a guy win the Norris Trophy?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of interesting, right? Because there is a lot of talk of potential trade of Erik Karlsson, but like you said, he's got 4 years after this year on his deal, and we know how tight the caps are with most teams, right? Most teams are either up to the cap or really, really close to the cap. And I just don't see a team being able to fit in Karlsson's deal for the next 4+ years. And Karlsson's been having a great year this year, Norris caliber year, but that doesn't wash out what we've seen from the past 3 years from Karlsson, where he's been injury plagued and hasn't been able to stay on the ice. So, and yeah, I mean, like you said, this could be kind of the perfect run of, we're going to be a really bad team, but at least we have Erik Karlsson, who's really fun to watch. It kind of reminds me of Alex Rodriguez when he was on the Rangers for, way back in the day winning the MVP, but he was like on the worst team possible.
Oh, yeah.
So it could be kind of one of those type of situations for Sharks fans where it's like, yeah, we're really bad, but at least we get to watch Erik Karlsson do fun stuff. And it's been kind of a joy to watch it, especially when most nights are kind of slogs to get through games.
Yeah, I have to imagine it's just exciting to at least have a player like that that's not just, playing well by the standards of the team he's on, but across the entire league. I mean, not many other guys are putting up the numbers he is. Maybe Josh Morrissey in Winnipeg. And I know there's a few other good players, Cale Makar, spread out throughout the league as well. But Karlsson's certainly turning a lot of heads, and I think will be an interesting discussion as the season goes on of, his worthiness to win the Norris Trophy with the performance of his team. But I think if he keeps the numbers up, he should certainly be in the conversation. And he might not get dealt at the deadline, but I think there's a good chance that there could be some moves made with the Sharks selling, looking to build some capital for the future. What do you think are some of the more likely moves that we could see at the trade deadline from the San Jose Sharks? Are there particular players, whether that be prospects or at the NHL level, that you think could get moved? What do you think the plan is here as we're, a little less than 2 months away from the deadline?
I mean, yeah, you have to look at our potential UFA guys like Nick Bonino, Matt Nieto, James Reimer. Those 3 guys, I think, would help a lot of potential teams. Nieto and Bonino, great kind of third or fourth line guys who can kind of help come in, play on your PK is going to make your PK a lot better. They're going to, good guys in the locker room, kind of play the right way, all that fun stuff. James Reimer, I think if you're looking to kind of show up your backup goalie situation, or if your goalie maybe is a little dinged up, you want to give him some rest heading into the playoffs, or if you need a guy who can kind of come in and start a few games for you, I think Reimer could be that type of guy. Or maybe if your goaltending's a little wonky and you just, want to throw another guy into the mix. Those three guys are kind of for sure gone. Prospect wise, Ryan Merkley, who's the Sharks' former first. I don't know when I was getting into a discussion. When do you call a guy a former first round? That's when does But anyway, the Ryan Merkley, who is a first round pick for the Sharks, requested a trade. It seems like both him and the organization are kind of in need of a fresh start. So I expect him to get traded. And then other than Karlsson, the big one is Timo Meier, who is a an RFA after the season. So he has one more year that under control. You can sign him to a 1-year, $10 million qualifying offer next year, or you can give him a long-term extension. Timo Meier is really, really good at hockey. He's leading leading the Sharks in goals this year. I think he's at 24, 25 right now, and would be an asset to anybody's power play. Can score 5-on-5. Just a big power forward who gets the net, and he likes to shoot a lot. He's kind of the big thing where it kind of depends. Do the Sharks want to try to keep him, lock him up long term, or you trade him and try to get a kind of solid bounty of, a first round pick plus a top end prospect type of situation for Timo Meier, who's for a team that maybe they're trying to win a cup this year, and having Timo Meier step into your top line and step into your top power play and be a potential 40, 45 goal scorer for your team.
Yeah, that could be a huge ad for several different teams around the league, including I think even the Dallas Stars. They're going to be hunting a top 6 forward, I imagine, at the deadline, and I know we'll dive into that a little bit later. But as far as this year's upcoming draft, I know that it's a good ways away, but it could potentially be very prosperous for the Sharks and their organization. It's not a great year as far as the win column, but it could lead to a bright future. And of course, the golden prize is Connor Bedard. We all saw what he did at the World Juniors. We've seen what he's been doing in junior hockey just in general. And I mean, there is, of course, a chance that another team gets him, and maybe not San Jose, although I think Tankathon had the Sharks at 5 as of right now, a pretty decent odds to get the first overall pick. But in your eyes, if it's not Connor Bedard, who's another prospect in this draft that you would enjoy seeing on this team? Because there's plenty of other really good names, whether it's Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, another guy whose last name is Carlson, I've seen thrown out there. I mean, there's plenty of good names to choose from. So if not Connor Bedard, who's another guy that you wouldn't mind seeing in a Shark sweater for several years to come?
I mean, both those guys that you just mentioned right there, Adam Fantilli would probably be the first overall pick in most drafts if it wasn't for Connor Bedard.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big center, kind of, plays at Michigan right now, but moves. You get a lot of the Eric Lindros kind of comparisons, which I think is a pretty lofty comparison. But having a guy like that, if you're able to jump up to that second overall spot, I mean, Connor Bedard is going number 1. We can I'm sure we'll start to see the think pieces about should Fantilli be the number? No, Connor Bedard is my number 1 guy. We can just stop that now. But Fantilli would be a great consolation prize. If the Sharks kind of stay put or in that 4 or 5 range, if Leo Carlsson is there for them, I think they're going to be laughing to the bank. What he's doing in the SHL, we haven't seen since Forsberg type of, or the Sedin twins type of things. And we know the Sharks like to draft guys out of Sweden. 2021, William Eklund, first round pick. 2022, Phil Beested, first round pick. Going back to the Swedish well, I could see Mike Greer doing that as well, and having a guy like Leo Carlsson who can kind of come in, and then you have your Eklund and Carlsson kind of as the foundation of your future. Not a bad way to start.
Yeah, no doubt. Definitely some special players in this year's draft. And like you said, Fantilli, I think, could be the number 1 overall pick if it wasn't for, the generational talent in Bedard, like you said. So certainly not some bad options, even if you don't get the first overall pick. And got one more question for you. And this one a little bit more centered on the past. It's just some thoughts that I've had over the past few weeks in this season, with obviously Pete DeBoer taking over in Dallas. This road trip features that the Stars are on. It featured 2 of his former teams. They just played in Vegas on Monday. They have San Jose here on Wednesday night. And I'm just kind of curious as to what your thoughts were on him while he was in San Jose, and kind of when he was hired, because obviously he has this history of joining a team, making, the Stanley Cup finals or the conference finals, and then it's just kind of okay after that. And so I'm wondering, is this the peak? Is this Star season as good as it's been? Is this kind of where I should, let my expectations rest and they shouldn't go any higher? And I know the Sharks and the Devils even were, teams that missed the playoffs before DeBoer's arrival, whereas, here in Dallas, the Stars made it to the first round and almost beat Calgary. And then Rick Bowness, they mutually part ways. Maybe a little bit different situation, but I'm just kind of curious on what your thoughts were on Pete DeBoer. I know we've maybe talked about it on and off a little bit, maybe even when not recording, but I mean, what was kind of the feeling with DeBoer, even after, before he was hired, when he was hired, and then even after that Stanley Cup appearance?
I mean, yeah, when he came in, and he brought a team that was kind of underperforming and helped turn around. Granted that the Sharks did some good work in free agency that year. They signed guys like Joel Ward, kind of come in and help solidify that bottom six. And they found a goalie in Martin Jones to kind of ride to that Stanley Cup final. And things were great, especially when you have a very loaded kind of veteran team that the Sharks had during that time. You had, looking back, you had guys like Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Joe Pavelski, Logan Couture, Brent Burns. You had like a ton of guys. I mean, I just listed off several Hall of Fame caliber guys in that. But when things started to kind of fall apart, I don't know if he had like that kind of second pitch, right? If things aren't working well, what do you go to if this isn't working well? You could see the Sharks at the start of the kind of the cracks in the foundation. After that Stanley Cup run, some of these guys getting older. When you're spending a lot of draft picks, they're not drafting high because you're trying to win a cup. Your prospect pool isn't as deep as it would expect. And then you don't have guys to kind of come in and naturally replace those. And that's kind of where the Sharks were the past couple of years. But, some kind of lineup decisions, especially in the playoffs, of going for, the gritty guys over more skilled guys and stuff like that. That's kind of his power play, which I've not been a fan of, kind of that Pete DeBoer. And then we saw kind of this reincarnation with it with Bob Bugner, which I thought was kind of a very stale, get it to Brent Burns, let him shoot the puck. And then that works when you have Brent Burns and Joe Pavelski, two, really, really good guys at their position, especially Joe Pavelski and his ability to tip pucks, as you've seen over the last couple of years, where he just makes magic happen there. And having Brent Burns who can shoot rockets from the point, like that works. But then when you start to kind of take away those pieces, how do you kind of reinvent yourself? And that was kind of my worry with Pete DeBoer, just his inability to kind of, okay, I don't have these pieces anymore. How do I change my coaching philosophy to the guys I do have to try to get the most out of them?
Yeah, it's always interesting just to hear other perspectives on a coach who's, been around the league a little bit and I think gained some respect, but also, hasn't quite reached the pinnacle of the sport just yet, although he's gotten very close. And people in Dallas, including myself, really like him so far. And hopefully, things will work out for him in the end, whether that's this season or a few years down the line. Joe Pavelski re-signed a deal to come back for at least one more season. So I trust his judgment of he thinks the organization's in a good place. And he obviously wants to win a Stanley Cup before retirement as well. So you would think things are trending in the right direction, but only time will tell. But we'll continue on with today's Western Conference crossover, Locked On Stars, Locked On Sharks. But first, I want to say thank you to one of our sponsors, BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from NFL playoffs to basketball and the NHL. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. Sharks and Stars, not the only matchup between these two cities or these two regions of the country this week. The 49ers hosting the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL playoffs. 49ers favored as of right now, -3.5 over Dallas. So you want to bet on that, or other NFL playoff games, NHL games, you can do so at BetOnline. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at betonline.net as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline.net is where the game starts. All right, moving on this Wednesday, Western Conference crossover, Locked On Stars and Locked On Sharks. Flipping the script now to talk a little bit about the Dallas Stars, the road team in this game, their first and only trip to the Shark Tank this year. And JD, I'm here to give any insight that you or your listeners might want on the Stars, aka the the feeding system for the Sharks, it seems, with former players and former coaches at some point in their careers, it seems in small bunches making their way to Dallas.
So yeah, I mean, we saw kind of the first time that these two teams played, and that was Jake Ottinger's first game back, right? And the Sharks kind of had their way, especially in a game where, a little rusty, right? And the Sharks, I think, scored 5 goals on 18 shots, which is definitely really sustainable in hockey. But then I think last time we saw it was actually a pretty close back and forth game until the end. What do you think has kind of changed the most since the last 2 times that these teams have met? And kind of especially with Jake Ottinger, who came into this season with a lot of expectations, got hurt a little bit at the beginning of the year, but I think is kind of starting to round into form, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And part of, what's made him round into form is his ability to play really well on the road. I actually talked about it on yesterday's episode after the win in Las Vegas. He gets the shutout there. And he's had a few opportunities to pick up some other shutouts on the road as well. New York, Madison Square Garden, Keandre Miller scores with 0.9 seconds left. And then in Columbus as well, the Stars win a game where Columbus scored in the last 30 seconds of the game. So his numbers are good at home. They're good when they play in Dallas, but I think they elevate a little bit when they play on the road. And like you said, he played really well in the postseason. I think that was kind of the early indication of what his season would look like. Is he's kind of the backbone of the team on the road, because the Stars offense, it's better this year, and it's one of the better offenses in the conference and definitely in the Central Division, but it can disappear a little bit at times, especially when they're shorthanded. The Stars have been without Rope Hintz for a little over a week now, and so they haven't had as many, scoring opportunities in some of their games. But Jake Ottinger has really been kind of the calmness amongst some of the chaos that the Stars have gone through, because they've played some pretty good teams with Rope Hintz out, both New York teams, Las Vegas. They played Calgary not too long ago. So, I mean, I think he's just grown a lot in his maturity and his preparation over the season. And I think, that first game where the Sharks came to Dallas and, beat the Stars by a pretty sound margin. I think it was 5-2, 5-1, something like that. Jake's first game back from injury. I think he uses those games like that, because every goalie has, is good. Even the best ones have rough nights or nights that they'd like to redo. And I think he uses those and doesn't ponder on them too much, and, gets back to work. And I think that's really all you could ask for in a 24-year-old goalie who plays like one of the best in the league, but in all reality still has the majority of his career ahead of him.
Yeah, and you talk about the Stars on the road. The Sharks are abysmal at home. They have a 4-12-7 record at home this year. For some reason they just cannot play well at home. We saw against the Devils, they gave up a goal on the first shift of the first period. They gave up a goal the first 10 seconds of the third period, and they gave up a goal in the first the last 10 seconds of the third period. So they have a tendency to collapse at really inopportune times. So I don't expect anything different from here. But I mean, the Stars, I think, have been kind of one of the big surprises this year, right? I know Winnipeg right now is kind of leading the way, but I mean, we all kind of penciled in Colorado, like, hey, it's Colorado's division, and then we figured the Wild, the Stars, maybe the Blues. But I mean, Dallas has been way kind of better than expected. What do you think has been, other than Ottinger, what do you think has kind of been the reason for that? Is it his name, Jason Robertson?
One of the big reasons certainly is Jason Robertson. He has taken some massive steps this season. And I think there was a stretch where he went on an 18-game point streak where he was kind of at the center of attention. He was tied with, Connor McDavid in points and goals. And then McDavid, I'm sure, got scared and is doing what he's doing now.
He played the Sharks the other night. That's probably what happened.
83 points this season, and it's not even the All-Star break. He might hit 100 before the All-Star break, which is crazy to think about. But Jason Robertson is, still top 10 in scoring, top 10 in goals. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's done, and I think it's a huge credit to playing alongside Joe Pavelski and then also Rope Hintz when he's healthy. But Tyler Sagan's been slotting in as the top line center, and even he has done a pretty good job alongside those two. So it's made up one of the best top lines in the NHL that really can just go toe to toe with just about anybody in the league, with that mixture of Pavelski's. You mentioned earlier the way that he tips pucks and just his vision and IQ mixed with the speed and shooting ability of the other two wingers. And it just makes all three of those guys incredibly dangerous. And I think that's a testament to Pete DeBoer coming in and implementing his system with this group of players. And I think that's been a theme across the league with all these coaching changes, is some coaches left cities where their systems maybe didn't work, like Rick Bowness in Dallas, but now he's gone to Winnipeg and his system is working wonders up there. And of course, Connor Hellebuck, I'm sure helps that as well. And Josh Morrissey and so on and so forth. But Dallas, I think, is the same way. Things didn't end well for DeBoer in Vegas. He comes to Dallas and he's got, that top line. He's got Jake Ottinger and he's also got Miro Heiskanen, who he's maybe not putting up the same numbers as you would have seen maybe Brent Burns put up in San Jose when he was in more of his prime. But Miro Heiskanen and the defense in general, I think, has taken some steps forward in terms of contributing to the offense. It's Miro Heiskanen, it's Niels Lundqvist, even guys like Esa Lindell, who are more pure, defensive defensemen, are finding ways to score, whether that's actual goals from the blue line or just putting a puck on net and hoping for a rebound or a deflection. And it's really just, a lot of different guys getting involved, and, you get some good contributions from your veterans, a lot of expectations on Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn this season. And both of them are having some of their best years in a while.
I mean, yeah, we know. Find you somebody who loves veteran like Pete DeBoer, because he loves his veteran.
He sure does.
So, I mean, what do you think is kind of the missing piece for this team, right? If you want, we're going to start to kind of see that arms race as best we can between now and the trade deadline. And like I said earlier, I know a lot of teams are kind of dealing with cap issues and stuff, but what do you think is kind of the missing piece for this team to be able to go toe to toe with the Colorado or Vegas or the Kraken or the Kings and try to get out of the West?
Yeah, and I think I hinted at it a little bit earlier, but I think the answer for the Stars is a top
Matt
six
Nieto.
Oh, I'm sure if only that could work out.
Hey, second line winger Matt Nieto, baby. That's
you never know. Sometimes a change of scenery is all you need, and I mean, stranger things have happened. That's for sure. But it's a top six winger. I think that's really what the Stars need, and they're getting that top line scoring, and everything else has really just been a kind of a mix and match hodgepodge of, well, let's try this guy with this guy and let's, change this lineup a little bit. Really, the only other constant players has been Jamie Benn and the rookie Wyatt Johnston, who's having a good season because he's playing alongside, a veteran captain of the team. But everyone else has just kind of been a revolving door, trying to find guys to play along Tyler Seguin on the second line, and then finding guys that can, play those, tough grinding minutes on the third and fourth line, but also can score every now and then. And I think if they can get that true top six winger that can stay there permanently and kind of let these other guys trickle down the lineup, your Dennis Guryanovs, your Mason Marchments, then I think that the roster becomes a little bit more complete. And then, like you said, you can go toe to toe with some of these other powerhouse teams out West. And I mean, it certainly is an arms race. And I think the Western Conference is going to be a little bit more competitive throughout the longer this season, whereas it feels like, and this happened last year, the Eastern Conference was just kind of already set up by the time we got to the All-Star break. And at least with the top three spots in those divisions, I feel like we're going to be pretty set. And then it's just kind of a race for who's going to get those wild card spots. But out West, nothing is really secure yet with either team or either division.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there, where it's just like, because I think there's just been a lot more kind of teams that we didn't expect, right? You look at like I mentioned, like the Kraken, who are, I thought they were kind of on their way, and I liked them adding Matty Beniers and Shane Wright this year in the draft, and you thought like, okay, like you have a foundation, but they're like competitive and they can score on you, and they can score on you in bunches. And then like the Kings, who again made kind of the same thing, like got that taste of the playoffs, working through their rebuild, and then okay, we're gonna add Kevin Fiala. Now look at us, we're ready to they need to kind of. I still worry about their goaltending. Yes. And then Vegas, we know Vegas, whenever their guys are healthy, those guys, Eichel and Stone, that's a pretty good start for most teams. And then with Colorado being so injured this year, it kind of does feel like more wide open. But with Colorado, do you kind of feel like it's the looming kind of, or the sleeping giant that's ready to wake up and just start putting people stacking teams around here soon?
Yeah. That's kind of my thought. And I think if you ask the other people that cover the Central Division and their teams, that's kind of where everyone's at, is take advantage now and try to get your points racked up and get as many wins as you can. Because when that team's 100%, I just don't see why they can't be the same threat that they were in the playoffs last year. Like that you lose, Andre Burakovsky, you lose Nazem Kadri, but all the really, really good players are still there. And I've been saying for a while now that they're one of those teams that they might not be the highest seeded team in the postseason, but you don't want to get that matchup. And I know the Stars definitely don't want that matchup. I think they'd much rather get, a matchup either within their own division of Minnesota, Winnipeg, or, one of the Alberta teams that's kind of sitting on the fringe of wild card spot right now. I think I'd take and even then, you don't necessarily, I don't think, want Edmonton either, because then you have to go up against Connor McDavid. So I think the Stars would prefer that, Colorado either stays the same and maybe Nashville or St. Louis sneaks in, or you stick with the, a fringe playoff team from the Pacific as well. So as long as it's not Colorado, I think Dallas has a good chance in the postseason.
Yeah, you just want to hold off on playing Colorado as long as you possibly can, because you expect them to get healthy hopefully get healthy, or maybe not hopefully get healthy. Well, I mean, I want to watch good hockey, so you do want to see those guys to as someone who doesn't have a horse in the race, you do want to see those guys get healthy and kind of everybody playing at their full capacity. That was kind of what sucked about last year when they played the Preds and UC Saros got hurt, and it's just like, oh, well, there goes that for, at least like UC Saros might be able to steal a game or two from them.
Yeah.
But, yeah. All right. So if you are GM Dane Lewis, I know you're trying to add a top six winger. Where else, maybe kind of some fringe moves, are you trying to, smaller pieces, not those big splashy ones, but maybe a smaller piece to try to kind of add to the Stars team?
Yeah, you could go, I think, defenseman and find a route there, like a bottom pairing guy. I think the defensive core is fine overall. There's a few gaps here and there, and there's some nights where defensively they're not super sound. I think they've been better as of late, but there's guys like Ryan Suter who's making way too much money for how old he is. And I mean, you just spend 2 minutes on Stars Twitter and it's, 20%. Hey, we love Jason Robertson and we love Jake Ottinger. And then the rest of it is like, fire Ryan Suter into the sun. And so it's, it's guys like that, or guys like Yanni Hakanpää that are big guys. They can check hard, but they're not necessarily the most sound on the defensive end. And so if they could look to round that out, but you mentioned earlier, a lot of teams up against the cap, and the Stars, after, re-signing Jason Robertson and after extending Rope Hintz and Jake Ottinger, and Joe Pavelski's getting a new deal next year, they just don't have a ton of money lying around, but I think they have some pieces down at the AHL level that they might can move. Anton Hudobin's been down there all season, kind of rehabbing. He got injured last year, but he has I think like a $3.3 million cap hit against the team. So the Stars could look to move him and send him off to a team looking for, goaltending support, similar to, what James Reimer could do, and some prospects as well. There's some guys that I think that you don't want to move on from, like Logan Stankoven.
He's very good.
Yeah, he's so good. Like, if Connor Bedard's not in that World Juniors, he's probably like the guy that everyone's talking about. But again, it's Connor Bedard. So what are you going to do? But I mean, it's not just him. There's Jordan Kyrou's brother, Christian Kyrou, who's a defenseman playing junior hockey right now. He's second round pick from the 2022 draft. Lian Bichelle, first round pick, playing in Sweden. That was representing Team Switzerland in the World Juniors, just both countries starting with S, and gets me confused. But there's certainly some pieces that, I mean, if it's a really, really, like franchise altering top six player, top defenseman, I think maybe you consider moving on from those guys. But it has to be like hey, this is almost securing an appearance in the conference or Stanley Cup finals. Cause
like a Timo Meier type.
Exactly. Like a guy like that, or a Bo Horvat, someone that is going to come in, and instantly make an impact. Cause you also, it'd be nice to win a championship, but you also have the other end of, do we want to hold on to these young pieces and, play the long game? So I think that's really the only other move. I think goaltending is fine. Scott Wedgwood has been a solid backup, and I think that could even be who we see tonight in the Wednesday game in San Jose, with it being game one of a back-to-back. I'm really curious to see how the Stars approach the trade deadline with, one, their cap space, but also I just feel like they're not maybe the premier landing spot, at least in a lot of people's minds. I think some people think that guys want to go to Colorado, or they want to go to New York, or even Boston, or, a city like that out east.
Yeah. I think though, that, do you want to play the long game, or do you only your window can close really fast? Just as Sharks fans, right?
Yeah.
We were Western Conference Finals to, we have made the playoffs in 4 years. This is gonna be the fourth year in a row type of situation. Like, it can close fast. And I know, like, in prospects too. Every fan overrates their own prospects. I do the same thing, except for William Eklund. William Eklund's very good, but every fan overrates their prospects. But at the same time, we've seen prospects do amazing things. I'm not saying Logan Stankoven or whoever, like, they're gonna burn, but we've seen them flame out. Brian Merkley for the Sharks, amazing prospect. Just for some reason now, where it's just not going to happen, type of thing. So I think for a team, like, especially, like, I know you do have a lot of young players like Hintz and Robertson, stuff like that. But Joe Pavelski, your Sagans, your Bens, those guys are getting a little long in the tooth here. And you got to think, especially with a guy like Pete DeBoer, I think this is probably their time, especially if Colorado doesn't get back to being fully healthy. This could be the time to try to steal one before the Avs kind of, regain their form and try to, roll through a couple Stanley Cups here for the next few years. So.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a exciting year, I think, for any team in the Western Conference. It feels like it's anyone's game there. It's just a matter of once you make it to the Cup Finals, you're playing Boston, or I almost said Toronto, but we all know that they'll be out by the first 2 weeks of the playoffs. But it's Boston, it's Carolina, it's Tampa. I mean, it's a tough year for sure. But I think DeBoer's been there, and I think this team has a decent amount of representation in terms of guys who've made deep runs, including some of the veterans on the team. So a lot of these guys have been so close. And I think this could be, a year that they make a move, especially if they can take advantage of Colorado being down. And even Vegas, who started off the year so strong, they're hurt. Seattle, is coming out of nowhere. And I know they just lost recently, but won like 8 in a row, and 7 of them were on the road. So
yeah, but that team's young, they haven't put, you get to the playoffs, how it is, you get to the playoffs and it's a whole different thing. And sometimes some of those guys are just, it's the lights get a little too bright.
Yeah, no doubt. And especially that team, their top scorer is Matty Beniers, who's great now. But again, the playoffs, just a completely different animal. And a lot of those guys either haven't been or haven't been in a while. So it could make for an interesting playoff experience. And even, you have your teams like Winnipeg, who no one expected to be here, but here they are tied for first in the Central. And I think technically atop the Western Conference right now. I know they just lost to Montreal tonight, but they're refusing to go away. They started off hot, and I thought, oh, they'll slow down eventually. They'll cool off, but they're still chugging along. Yep. Well, JD, thanks for doing this. Thanks for crossing over. Hopefully it's at least an entertaining game. I know this is the last one for the Sharks for a while at home. So my fear is they're going to give the fans one more good showing, even though you said they're not very good at home, but
they're terrible at home. No, this is like a 5-2 romp by the Stars. So yes.
Well, the Stars could definitely need it. They need to string some wins together and distance themselves in the division and in the conference. Cause again, Colorado's going to wake up eventually. So build up those points now while you can. Yep. But JD, thanks again for doing this. And if you want to take a second and just plug where Stars fans can find you in case they want more insight on the Sharks, especially with deadline season approaching, with, you never know what's going to happen. Maybe these two teams could make it some sort of deal.
Yeah, of course, you can find me on Twitter at MyFryhole. You can listen to the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can watch on YouTube. I just had an interview with Montana Onyebuchi, one of the San Jose Barracuda defensemen, came on. So really fun chat. And then if you're into the draft, there's no better place to go than Locked On Sharks. Because, we have nothing better to talk about than the draft. So.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, always. It feels like every at least once a week I'm looking and you have some Sharks prospect or Barracuda player, which is super cool. And I feel like not a lot of other outlets to get interviews like that and get some insight from some players that are going to be part of that franchise for a while, hopefully. And I know even some draft picks as well you've had on recently.
Yeah, I did have the Philip Beatstead after the Sharks first round pick. He was on last week, so talking about his run on with Team Sweden, so that was pretty fun. Yeah, that's super cool. But if any Sharks fans out there want more information on the Stars, or Dallas Stars fans, if you're just now finding us for the first time, you can find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. Find the show at Locked On Stars on Twitter and Instagram, and same goes for the podcast as far as podcasting platforms, free and available wherever, as well as on YouTube. So be sure to give us a subscription or a follow wherever you are listening or watching. But thank you guys for tuning in to today's Western Conference crossover, Locked On Stars and Locked On Sharks. And we'll catch you next time.